Well, joining us now here in the studio is Dr. Maria Misra, a historian and expert on India and the British Empire, and Abhinjit Singh, spokesperson for the Sikh Federation in the United Kingdom. Dr. Misra, should he have apologised?
Yes, I think so. I think it's about time the British did start apologising for their empire. I think saying that you feel remorse or that it was a shameful event is not enough. I also think that Cameron has been disingenuous in his deployment of Winston Churchill, who I think is not a very good get-out-of-jail-free card for anyone dealing with India. The truth was that Dyer was regarded in Britain as a hero. He was treated as a hero. He was mildly censured in Parliament for misconduct, but when he died, he was given a full military funeral and he was celebrated at the cenotaph. This is an appalling event that has never been properly apologised for.
And I'm wondering, how it would be seen by Indians and Sikhs in particular living here in Britain.
I slightly differ with Maria in the sense that David Cameron sort of tread a very careful line, not to use the words apology or sorry, but I think many Sikhs living here in the UK, probably born here, actually want to talk about more recent times. And we were quite surprised that he didn't refer to the more recent massacre in the Golden Temple in 1984, when tanks and artillery were used to kill pilgrims by the Indian government.
Well, then, of course,
itself.
he would have been in some difficulty with trying to sell jets to the Indian government.
That's right. But I think, given the way he was ambushed by Manmohan Singh in the press conference, I think sometimes, if you want to be honest, then you should be honest about the full history of India and the Sikhs.
Well, I think that Mr. Singh has an agenda and that Sikhs across the world and within India are divided. And I think that some Sikhs are unhappy that a full apology wasn't made for this particular event.
But it also seems that we're setting different standards for different enemies. I mean, in a sense, the Japanese were asked to apologise for a large number of things, and indeed have done so.
Well, I find, Cameron's excuse for not giving a full apology absurd, that he wasn't, that he hadn't been born. It was 40 years before he was born. I mean, he was only 3, when Bloody Sunday took place, but he seems to think that that was OK for him to apologise for that. I think if you're not going to make a full apology, and I think this is how it's being covered in India, it's probably best not to bring it up, because it just gives rise to these kinds of comparisons. One rule for brown people, one rule for white people. A disaster.
But there's really another story here, isn't there, which is very germane to Sikhs living here, because, I mean, traditionally, I don't know, I may be wrong, but my sense is that they've tended to vote Labour and the rest of it. And actually, David Cameron would rather like you on board.
I think by David Cameron going to the Golden Temple complex, paying his respects, some of the words he used, the language he used, that will go down well with the Sikh community, there's no doubt about it. Whether that will mean they vote Conservative is another issue altogether. Because, like I said, the vast majority of Sikhs in this country were born here or have lived their lives here.
Has he had much to do with the Sikh community here, for example? Has he been to see you?
He has, over a period of time. When he was in opposition, I remember he hosted an event in Parliament in 2003. He signed various early-day motions on the June 1984 massacre and the November 84 anti-Sikh pogrom. But since he's been Prime Minister, we've probably seen less of him.
How do you actually read Britain and India yourself as a historian now? We're kind of on the way out in a rather big way, aren't we?
Yes, I think we are. I think that probably an apology would help. It's not just the Amritsar massacre. I think that Indians are sensitive to the way that the empire still plays in British history.
Yeah, but you see, I'm just thinking in modern times, I mean, the very fact that we didn't manage to get them to buy these jets is a kind of big nail in the coffin, isn't it?
Well,
because in the old days, they'd have bought them straight off. They bought all those Hawk trainers and the rest of it.
Yeah.
So traditionally, you'd expect our, once imperial subjects to be buying.
Well, I'm not sure that you would expect them to do that. There's always been a strong strain of economic nationalism in India, and I think in some senses they probably take a certain amount of
French.
They take a certain amount of pleasure in not buying British. I think that's right. But I think that underpinning the problem with Cameron is that he's speaking with a forked tongue here. That he's almost apologising on the one hand, and yet he wants to make something of the colonial heritage on the other. On the other hand, of course, we have this immigration policy which very, very much affects Indian students coming here, and Indians are very aware of that, and they don't like it.
Well, Dr. Misra and Debinjit Singh, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.